Welcome back to the workshop. Today I'm going to talk about a project I did way back in 2015. This was done before the workbench was created, before the Dutch chest was made, and before I got a lot of the tools that I have. So it was a very basic project, and that is this three-legged stool. A very, very basic project. By myself, without any instruction whatsoever, I was able to cut a piece, or get the top piece, the round part, and make the three legs and put them in at an angle that worked, which was really, took a little bit of internet research to figure out what angle was correct, and then to do it. Now, as I said, when I made this thing, I didn't have some of the tools that I have today. I certainly didn't have any of these. I didn't have any braces, which is what you're supposed to use when you make these things. I had stuff like a cordless drill. A hammer. And again, I didn't have this workbench. So I was using a solid surface with a portable sort of, you can add it to the top of a counter with a face vise type of deal on it. And I was also using that Allied bench, the Allied portable work table. I used that a little bit too. So I'll show you what I did and how I made this thing. And if you want to make one of these, this gives you some inspiration and how easy it might be, then certainly check it out. It has been good use for many, many years. It was primarily made to be sort of a stool that could be used outside with gardening. I could sit on it and do weeding or planting or just whatever. And it worked that way for many years. It is coated with polyurethane. It's been left in the sprinkler. And actually, it sort of went along with the tool tote that I made at the same time that you may remember. This is the tool tote. These two worked very well together for gardening for several years. When you go to the big box store, they often have cutouts of material. They have wood sometimes, and a lot of times they'll have a cutout in a round shape, so you can go ahead and make a stool. I didn't do that. I, in fact, didn't realize they had that. I went out and got a big piece of pine, a big square piece of pine. Actually, it's probably a long board or something like that, because the top of this thing is actually made of two boards. And so there are two boards, two square boards that I glued together, and then after gluing them together, worked to cut out. And so you would take something that is square, using this bench hold down as an example. Basically, you start with a square, you start working, and you work yourself around, you get a circle. And so that's what I did in this case. Got a circle, and then I just kind of worked at it with a chisel. These chisels right here, nothing fancy, and probably also a plane, and the plane that I had at the time, and I still have it, but it's nothing fancy. It's something that you can buy from a big box store. This is a Stanley, but it's the type that has the movable pieces, rollers. And so that is what I would have used to make the top. Just working it around, much like a carver does, or someone who's doing that kind of work, just working it around to get that. Now, for the legs, or to get the legs in the position that they're in, I had to create a jig. I had looked online to see at what angle the legs of a three-legged chair or table should be splayed at, and it said about 71, 72 degrees. 71, 72 degrees. And so I had made a jig. There's pictures of that here. that worked at an angle, and I stuck the drill in at an angle and was able to drill the holes into the bottom. Now, I have since discovered, and as many of you probably know, the real way to do this is to use a brace. You put your piece in your vise, and then propping up against yourself, your brace, you move it along that way, and you get it that way. I didn't have that kind of technology, didn't have that kind of tool, so with the drill I was able to, through an angle, hit it and get it and go through, just as it's done here. And then the legs, I don't have a lathe, I don't have anything fancy like that, don't have a shaving horse or anything like that. Started with square pieces of wood and put them in a face vise, the one that I used on the counter, and just shaved it down. Didn't have a spoke shave, nothing fancy like that. I would have just used the Stanley chisels and probably a block plane. Probably we used a block plane and maybe also the Stanley plane, and got them down to the shape that I needed them. To push through and come out the other side. Now, once they came out the other side, I think I did at the time have the correct tool that was needed, which would be one of these. I have a handle, of course, as well, but a flush saw, and used the flush saw to cut off the ends after they had been glued to the top pieces. And so that is how I was able to make a three-legged stool without many tools or any fancy working surfaces or any fancy know-how either. So I'm sure there's plenty of videos out there that show how to use a three-legged stool, and check some of those out if you have the tools or the work surfaces to do it. But this is just sort of to inspire some of you that there are ways to make things that it works very well. This is not the best service for it, but it is very sturdy and can hold my weight, so as well as some others. So it's a great stool for me, and really works well in my workshop.